Hi, I'm here with Clair Marie Wholean, AIA LEED AP BD+C, and founding principal of Archfina. Clair Marie has completed over 40 built projects in the US and abroad. Prior to founding Archfina, Clair Marie established her career at SOM New York, SmithGroup DC, and award-winning small firms in New York, Baltimore, and DC. Her early career focused on schools, hospitals, historic buildings, and environmentally sustainable design. Her practice now includes net zero design, zoning consulting, historic renovations, and building science research. Welcome, Clair Marie.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. What are your first recollections of experiencing architecture?
This is a great question, and I really liked how it brought back some really nice childhood memories. So I'm from Madison, Wisconsin, and it's not a place you typically think of with architecture, but there were some special buildings that I remember. The first one is the Capitol. It's the state capitol in Madison, and it's very similar to the national capitol in DC. It has almost identical design and materials, except for having the DC one has two main wings and a dome, and the Madison one has four, so it's in a cross shape. And I remember going in the center and looking up at the dome, and there's like paintings on the inside of the dome and just spinning around and remembering how magical that was as a kid. And then there's a couple more buildings. One was a music venue. It was called the Barrymore Theater, and my dad worked there. He did maintenance, so he fixed up the building. It was an old theater from the 1920s, silver screen era, that had become somewhat dilapidated, and they were restoring it so that they could have music concerts there, like, you know, Fish and Wu-Tang Clan. And my dad just did a whole bunch of renovations there over the years. So I would get to see that building. And they had a double ceiling where there were lights on the part that you couldn't see, with little holes. So it twinkled like stars. Yeah. It was really good.
Yeah. I know there's something that's so wonderful about those classic theaters. I mean, growing up in Pittsburgh, we used to always go, it was before the multiplex, so we used to always go to the theaters that even around the corner from my house. So we would go there for a movie, but then you could also go and see performances like musical, like I saw Godspell there, and it was, I mean, there's really something nice about those theaters.
There's one more building that I remember too, and I realized as I wrote these down, they're all very large buildings. So I must have liked the expansiveness of multi-story spaces. The third one is a convention center, and that it's actually circular shaped, very, very large circle. Seats probably 20,000 people, like a sports stadium. However, the exterior wall, it's folded. So it's almost like you had a pleated skirt, but that's the exterior wall, and the roof has these kind of undulating pleats.
Which one was that?
It's the convention center.
Okay.
I don't know the architect for that. We used to go there for religious conventions, actually, with my mother. And I was fascinated with the building, so I used to count all of the elements of the building as we were sitting there. I would make a list in my notebook and count this many light fixtures, this many ducts, like this many like sprinklers. It's like so fascinating to me because it was so huge.
Yeah. I think we think that way a lot. I mean, I know a lot of times they'll say that that's if you talk to a psychologist, they'll immediately peg you into some to put you on a spectrum. And I've it's from having kids that also did that. And I'm just saying, well, I mean, one of my kids is like, but I'm like saying, well, that's just, I mean, what's wrong with that? There's like nothing, like, I don't see anything that's wrong with
that. I also used to sort my Legos. So before I would play with them, I sorted them into colors.
Yes, yes, which, yeah, yeah, psychologists will freak out over that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which we just see as this natural, that's just a natural
Yes.
part of our
That's the way the brain
personality.
works.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, and then of course, being in the Midwest and Frank Lloyd Wright and the other way, and my husband's grandparents grew up, or they owned a Walter Burley Griffin and Marion Mahoney house. So it's like that's kind of my experience on that level of being in the Midwest.
Mhm.
And I've never been to Chicago, believe it or not. Yes, I've never been to
Well,
Chicago.
it's a
So I am going sometime this year. I don't know when, but it is going to be, yeah, because I wanted to go there and I've never gone. I've just been, like I said, Mason City, Iowa. Um, so,
Well, speaking of Frank Lloyd Wright,
uh-huh.
when I talk about architecture back home, that's the first thing everyone mentions. That's the first architect that always comes to mind.
Hmm.
And I will say his houses were not my number one design for houses because
Yeah.
I'm on the taller side and they tend to have very low ceilings. I
Uh-huh.
do really appreciate his use of materials, specifically wood, and the way he ties in the wood throughout the house can be
Hmm.
really cool. And the commercial buildings. I'm much more into his commercial buildings.
Yeah. 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 And experiment and longevity, I think, is right. He was working into his 90s, but it started basically in his 20s. So that's a lot of work that somebody can produce.
It is. Yeah, I saw the Johnson Wax building about a year ago
Hmm.
and very pleasantly surprised. I really liked it.
Uh-huh.
Um, and there's also a building called what's it called? The Terrace. I think it's just called I forgot exactly the name, but it's
Hmm.
on Lake Minnesota and
Uh-huh.
it has arches and it's an event space. So
Okay.
there are weddings. I think actually there might be an opera that plays
Uh-huh.
there. So they
Uh-huh.
have all kinds of special events. And that building, actually, he didn't finish it when he died. It was half finished and it was shelved for like 30 or 40 years.
Hmm.
And people couldn't decide what to do with it. And then eventually the city decided, we want this building and we're going to build it finally. So they had another architect, update and modify the plans. And they did build it, I think maybe around 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in Pittsburgh, but I had never been to Falling Water until 94, no, 95, when we went back to a wedding. And then we
Mhm.
took our daughter, who was like a year old, who wasn't allowed to go into Falling Water. She had to stay at they have this whole, they have this whole like hexagonal daycare center there. And she was the only one, right? Because everybody else is there. They didn't have kids, or their kids were older. I think maybe over age 12, you are allowed to take your kids in. It might be different now, but yeah, but that was the first time that I had ever seen, that was the first time I'd seen Falling Water, even though I'd grown up back there. It's
Mhm.
kind of more of like the Richardsonian things that I had seen in downtown Pittsburgh, and kind of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what are 3 classic buildings that you like, and why?
This is a great question. And I picked mostly buildings in or around DC. The first one I'll mention is Bancroft Hall, and that's in Annapolis, Maryland. It's at the Naval Academy, and it's a Beaux Arts design. It's housing for the
Hmm.
midshipmen. So it's basically student housing, but it's the fanciest student housing you will ever see, and probably one of the best examples of Beaux Arts style architecture outside of Europe.
Hmm.
It's also near the water, so it's just a beautiful site, and the way that it's arranged on the campus, there's a street that has an axis, and then that's at the end. So there's a view where you
Uh-huh.
see it from a long ways away.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll put like, what I've done is I've put photographs of everybody's 3 classic buildings, and then plus if there are other buildings, from your first recollections, or there's another building that you call out in the interview, I put it into the blog for those photographs.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I like that. So then two more. The next one is St. John's Church, and that's by Benjamin Latrobe. It's in DC. It's right next to the White House. So it has a lot of cool history there because all of the presidents went to that church at one time or another. It's now an Episcopalian church. And it's tiny. Most of the buildings around it are much larger. Super classic Greek Revival style. And it's similar to the Baltimore Basilica, also designed by Latrobe. What's really great about it when you walk in, compared to any Gothic style churches, is that there's a large sense of openness. Even though it's a small building, the floor plan is very open. It feels very airy. The colors are like yellow and white and stained glass. And the profiles, the details of all of the millwork was just immaculately detailed. He really considered every single piece and how it went together and what the shadow lines were. Then the third one is the Executive Office Building, and that's in DC. It's also near the White House, and that's French Empire style. So it has a mansard roof. It has a very regular rhythm of windows and a lot of quite ornate ornamentation. It's a gray color, a lot of stone on the exterior. The architect is Alfred Mullett. And I picked that one because it's a super icon in DC. Everyone knows that building. And when you walk past it, you just can't help but stare at it. It just captures your attention.
I've been to DC a couple times and I can't remember whether I saw any of these buildings. Maybe I saw them, but I didn't know which ones they were. I know that I didn't see the, I haven't been to Annapolis, so I didn't see Bancroft Hall, but I did want to look at it now because like I had said about one of my second cousins graduated from Annapolis, so I'd like to.
Can I squeeze in one more?
Yes.
Okay.
Go right ahead. You can make up for the ones that will only say one. I'm only going to give you one. That's what.
Okay. So there's one more, and that is the Morgan Library in New York. And I believe it's on 33rd Street, 32nd or 33rd on the east side. And that is a limestone building, and it houses a lot of like rare artifacts. And there was a recent, not super recent, maybe like 10 years ago, renovation and addition by Renzo Piano. And I bring up this building because it really shows how the classic and the contemporary can work together. So the addition is super modernist. It's very clean. It's glass. There's a little bit of stone, but it's mostly glass. And there's an atrium that has skylights that's connecting the old and the new. So it's really good example of the juxtaposition of the old and the new.
Yes. What is the building in DC that did Renzo Piano do that one, or was it Richard Rogers? That covers one of the museums, and then there's that space that's I forget
National Gallery of Art, the Institute of Peace.
Is it?
There's multiple buildings that have that, so I'm not sure which one.
I know there's one in actually Ben. Everybody that goes to AIA National like always goes to that space, and I said, oh, that's funny. That's like one of my favorite spaces there too. But yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. I'll figure out which one.
Cool. That's good.
So what do you like about being an architect?
I'll say the number one thing is the freedom, because there's so many possibilities, so many things you can do. And there were times in my career where actually I didn't feel freedom. Once I got into a project architect role, I was getting recruited very heavily, and the firms just wanted me to do just that. And since I did so well at that, even now that I have my own company, I'm still getting recruited for that. So there is a little bit of a funnel where they want to keep you in that role, but you can do anything. You can break out of that. You can be technology oriented. You can be more art oriented. You can work in any style, you can work in any country. There's so many different options. And I just really like that freedom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's what creatively and intellectually.
Yes, yeah, it is both, because there's creative freedom in terms of, the form and the style and the art part, but then there's also intellectual freedom because it's a science and an art.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting more into research in my practice, and I love that intellectual freedom, because when we think about buildings, it's not just the the technical kind of pragmatic, how does it go together in terms of construction, but the concept also really matters, and the big picture, what is going on with architecture in the big picture, because it's always reflecting a culture and a time period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Now that's like I had said about how I wanted to be an artist when I was in high school, and but I was thinking about architecture, but I didn't know whether I would be able to do the math, which is another whole story I tell all the time, that I don't have good math skills, but anyway, at least algebra skills. Was that the I was going to these art classes on Saturday, and the teacher, who's also an administrator there, said like, oh, I think that, are you going to come to art school here? And I said, well, no, I think I want to go into architecture. And he said, well, I think that you're going to feel very limited by going into architecture. And I was thinking more like, oh no, there's so many different architectural styles. There's other, processes, right? Because this is somebody in high school, right? I just taken some drafting classes. I really like to draw. And he said, oh, but the older that I get, I realize more about how I'm not limited by architecture, and how I feel like I can express myself in all these different ways. Like the blog, I can still draw and paint and do things like that, as and make architecture.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to be an artist too, and I'm not sure what. Well, I think it was because my parents told me you need to make money.
Yes, I think
more money in
most
architecture.
people, exactly. I think that's why a lot of people do it. Yeah.
I think that it is way better for me though, because if I just did art, I would be missing the science part, and I can be very techie. Like I love that science part.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fact that architecture has problem solving. Mm-hmm. So art is not really, it's more about expression. Whereas in architecture, you have expression and you have problem solving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Which, I mean, I'm starting to wonder, because I see a lot of these in museums. I think with a lot of artists now, they're moving more towards more technology, or some of the things like that. A lot of these kind of like art spaces that they're coming up with use a lot of technology in them. Like if you've ever been to like a Wonder Spaces, like lighting and putting the lighting on, using a computer to program the lighting to create these different effects as people walk through, and it's including a lot of technology in it that I think that it wasn't there before. And a lot of it's getting more into the conceptual spaces of things, and not so much just a static, a static painting on a wall sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of the overlap, the interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
The art of space.
Yes, the art of space. What would you like to say about the future of architecture?
Oh, that's such a good topic. My number one thing is the business model, and how that really needs to change. So architects are kind of stuck in this fee-for-service model that is not working as well as it could, because we kind of treat ourselves like we're lawyers, but we're not lawyers, and we don't stand up for our worth enough. We don't charge enough, and it causes all kinds of other problems by not doing that. So I would love to see hybrid business models where architects blend together with construction, with technology, with research and development, with developers, real estate, and really make just alternative practice models where we're not chained to the billable hour, because that does restrict creativity And it also restricts innovation.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see that stuff change.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. It's difficult to say to ask a person, well, how much is it going to cost to, produce these drawings? And it's like, well, it's not just about the drawings, it's about spending time with you, getting to know you, being able to, create something, either it's a brand new house and or it's, we're adding on and remodeling your existing house, changing the way that you're going to use this space. And it's a lot more than just producing the drawings. A lot more is going into producing the drawings and experience. And it's hard to say to people, they say, well, how much is it going to cost? What does an architect typically charge? I said, well, there's a wide range as far as what, and as far as what they're going to produce, or, their different process. And yeah, so I think we definitely need some other way to kind of sell ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a lack of business knowledge, and part of that is from education. The education system doesn't really address business that much. Both management of people as well as management of resources, financial time, otherwise. And then the way of doing business that architects learn on the job is by learning from other people who, again, had no education in it. So we're kind of perpetuating this cycle of, not knowing that much about business because we want to focus on the art part, which is fun. But that's where I get into my one thing that I believe is that we should have a little bit more specialized roles in architecture. Instead of just saying, every architect can do everything, it would be great to have designated tracks. Like in medicine, you have all these paraprofessionals that do different things that help make the team more effective as a whole. We could have people who specialize in BIM, people who specialize in marketing, business development, accounting, software, construction. All of those could become more formalized tracks that have an educational preparation that's not as long as an architect, but still something, so that people are going into it, with some knowledge, but you're also not getting architects that spent, 5 to 7 years in school, then becoming like a BIM specialist, because maybe that's not what they want to do.
Yeah. No, I think you've got a lot going there. I think we should sell that. We should try to sell that to the architecture schools.
Well, there's someone working on it. Randy, I can't pronounce his last name. I think it's Deutsch.
Is it Randy Deutsch that was the publisher of or the editor of?
He published a book recently. He lives in Chicago. He's on Twitter, and he talks a lot about the education of architects and how that can be changed. And he's also focused on how can we educate architects more about technology, make technology specific tracks within architecture. Yeah.
Which that's today's Architecture Week, and I think I'm going to post this for Architecture Week, but today is architecture and education.
Oh, great!
So there you go. See, if I can just hurry up and post it, but I think we can get at least by tomorrow.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. And so, was there anything else that you wanted to say about your practice, or any of your of your practice?
So I mentioned about the freedom and how you can really do anything with architecture, and also an alternative business model of blending architecture and research. So I'm going in that direction where I'm moving away from doing traditional projects, moving more into research, focused on the problem of building quality, because we have inconsistent quality across the industry. We have some really amazing buildings, a lot of buildings that are not so amazing, but we don't have a systematic way to compare it. And some of the methods that we're using to compare, like design quality index, either they're very qualitative, or it's not used on a widespread basis across the industry, or it applies only to new buildings but not to existing buildings. So I'm looking at how do you just measure quality overall for buildings, but to do it in a scientific way where you end up with something that is quantitative, that you can put into computational analysis, whether it's economic analysis or AI, in order to make more educated decisions about building quality so that we can move towards having higher quality buildings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's, and was that kind of, I know we had spoken before about kind of the software integrating different, that every firm should have some type of software integration or developing software.
Yes, I would love to see every firm have, you know, programmers and R&D people, specialists in software that are working in tandem with architects. And data also, I just want to mention, is such an untapped resource, because architects, we are authors of drawings that have one drawing set may have, you know, hundreds of thousands of pieces of information about a building, and no one really is taking advantage of what you could do with this information. If you look at CoStar, for example, they're like a real estate data firm, and they provide information on commercial real estate for developers and other real estate people. They sell, for example, access to their database of information. I won't tell their exact number, but it's between $50,000 and $100,000 for 1 year of access to that information. And it's not very detailed. It doesn't include a lot of information that I would want to know if I was a building owner. Like, I can't find out the construction class. I can't find out how many renovations it had, what was the date of the last roof replacement, you know, things like that, that are really critical knowledge for facilities management and planning of your building. Didn't even have that information. So us architects, we are sitting on a huge repository of information that we're not monetizing, and we're not getting it out to the right people where they could make smarter decisions if they had that information. Yeah.
No, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, because so many people, you know, they're like, oh, I thought, you know, I mean, when we go to redraw, you know, when we go to do the as-built drawings, right? I mean, you know, people say, I don't have the plans for that. So doesn't the city have that? And I'm like, most likely not. I said, they might have a site plan. I said, but really that's about the only information they're going to have. Maybe, you know, there are some cities now that are, you know, that are scanning and documenting all of those things. But then, of course, you know, the problem with that is that now a lot of people are going to the building department, right, and they're taking photographs of your work off of the screen, then going back and using that to, right, even though they're not supposed to be. Yeah, even though it's supposed to be not. Yes. Yeah. So, but I think that's a great idea, and you know, I look forward to seeing more of your information on that in the future.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me, Michelle. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much, Clair Marie.
Okay, take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.